Question number 5, the Honourable Barbara Edmonds.
Meitaki maata, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Does she stand by her statement, quote, "Our budget was very deliberate in the funding of core priorities because our priorities are the same priorities as New Zealanders," unquote? If so, is she concerned that her choices are disconnected from everyday New Zealanders?
Mr Speaker, in answer to the first part of the question, yes. In answer to the second part of the question, no.
Supplementary. Has Cabinet approved funding for KiwiRail to break its contract with Hyundai Mipo for 2 new rail-enabled inter-island ferries? And does she believe paying Hyundai hundreds of millions of dollars not to build ferries is a priority for New Zealanders?
Mr Speaker, the negotiations between KiwiRail and Hyundai are a commercial matter between those two parties and not something that I view that it is in the public interest to comment on in this House. I have previously made clear the government's view that we can have safe, reliable ferry services and that we will take the action needed to ensure that is the case.
Supplementary. Is she aware that since KiwiRail contracted for the ferries, the price of new ships has risen by 50% in US dollars? And can she guarantee the new ferries and sunk costs from cancelling the ferries will be less than $2 billion?
Mr Speaker, on the advice I have received to date, I can be very confident that the cost of delivering new ferries will be less than the projected cost of the failed and flawed Project IREX, even when sunk costs are taken into account. And I had the experience yesterday, Mr Speaker, of visiting Centreport, where they showed me where hundreds of millions of dollars would have had to be poured in to allow for enormous ships with enormous berths and rail enablement. And I asked them how much would it cost to ensure that wharf could take a normal-sized ferry, and they said zero.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Honourable Barbara Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I asked the Minister if the sunk costs in the new ferries would be less than $2 billion. The figure that she points to in relation to it being less than is actually $3 billion, according to reports by her comments.
Well, if the question had been a little more clear in that regard, it might have been helpful, but I can't rule that the question wasn't answered.
Supplementary. Is she aware that E-Flexa ferries the Ministerial Advisory Group recommends are at least 50% larger than the largest current ferry and will need new wharfs and infrastructure, meaning she will have to make most of the landside investments that she cancelled under the Cook Strait ferry project?
Well, Mr Speaker, two things. First, the member is making a series of assertions about a report that is not in the public domain, and I would suggest to her she be very careful about whether or not the sources she is getting her information from are providing her with accurate, fully contextualised information, because it will eventually go to her credibility if she makes assertions in this House that are incorrect. Second, Mr Speaker, I wish to offer a point of clarification in regards to the previous comments that I made, to be clear with the House. When I said zero, what I meant was the potential cost to the Crown. It will, of course, cost something to upgrade port facilities. The point is what cost the Crown incurs.
Supplementary.
Just wait for the House to quieten down.
Is she aware that procuring new ferries that are not rail-enabled will cost $150 to $200 per container? And is she putting that extra cost on Kiwi businesses a priority for her government?
Mr Speaker, again, the member is unfortunately making assertions without grounding in fact. And so I would point this out to the member. She is now in the position of defending a project which blew out to a total cost of at least $3 billion. Now, the cost of that project, members, only a tiny percentage, around 21%, was actually for the cost of ships. The rest of it was all for building berths and facilities that were big enough to take ships. The previous government, Mr Speaker, committed to cars that were far too big for the garage, had no plan to build the garage, and then found out halfway through the garage was going to cost more than the car.
Supplementary. Supplementary. Is it prudent financial management for her to cancel the Cook Strait ferry project with no alternative plan, to have no idea what the contract break fees would be, and to have no idea how much alternative ferries and infrastructure would cost?
Yes, Mr Speaker, for two reasons. One, because we can be confident that we can deliver safe, reliable ferry services into the future with less cost than would have been required with the project committed to by the previous government. And second, I'd just like to make this point to the House. Today, yesterday, the day before, there were crossings by the Blue Bridge Ferry Company that were on time and reliable. And do you know how much public money went into those crossings? Zero.
There's the privatization.
I'm just waiting for the House to...
Point of order, Mr.
come.
Speaker.
Well, I'll call you as soon as we're all tidy. Right Honourable Chris Hipkins.
In light of the Minister's last answer, Mr. Speaker, if it turns out that Blue Bridge in fact cancelled sailings this week because one of its own ferries was encountering difficulties, would you expect the Minister to correct that answer?
Put that point of order again, sorry.
The Minister just made a claim that Blue Bridge has had a flawless record this week and that's Cook Strait ferry operations. If it turns out that Blue Bridge had in fact been cancelling sailings and disrupting its own operations this week because of its own difficulties, would you expect the Minister to correct that answer in the House?
Well, in so much as the Minister has some responsibility for the timetabling of Blue Bridge ferries, perhaps. But if there's something that the Minister discovers later is incorrect, then I would expect it to be corrected as we had earlier today.
Mr Speaker.
Speaking of the point of order.
I'm quite happy right here and now to clarify that when I used the rhetorical device of this week, perhaps what I should have said and would have been more accurate is that in general, Blue Bridge provide reliable services that don't require public subsidy, and the point that the member makes is a fair one, and he should assist his finance spokesperson more regularly.
When I say stop, I would like the Minister to please stop.